Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. We have another very special guest today, Andrea Sonnenberg. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, nice to be here.
I'm glad we finally were able to meet. And uh, Andrea, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself for our audience?
Sure. Like you said, my name's Andrea Sonnenberg, and I am a lawyer by training. So that was my first foray into the professional world. And then I realized that my calling really was helping people and really helping children in particular. And I founded a literacy and enrichment program from students from underserved communities. Worked in that field for a very long time. Still, that's still a huge passion of mine. But almost 5 years ago, I lost a son who struggled with mental health issues for many years. And after that loss, I changed and I had to look deep inside of myself and figure out a way to move forward. And I realized that what I could do was try to take what I had learned from raising a child that struggled with mental health issues and try to use that experience and learn even more myself and take that and try to help other people. So now I would say that I am a very avid and active mental health advocate, working to help as many people as I can with the large and daunting struggle of mental health challenges. I'm Jewish, and in Judaism, we say if you can save one life, you save the world. So I'm looking to help one person. And if I can help one person, I feel like I will have accomplished my mission in partnership with my son, Bradley, that I lost almost 5 years ago.
Thank you very much. And I'm Parag Bharadwaj. I'm a palliative care physician in the United States. All right. So tell us a little bit about your son and his journey and a glimpse into who he was.
So he was a twin. He was born in 1996. He was a beautiful child, physically and emotionally. He was creative and curious and sensitive and passionate. And a lot of those things go along with having challenges in life. Because a lot of times when you're so sensitive and you're so passionate and you feel things so strongly, sometimes those can cause challenges in your life. So from a very early age, he struggled with things like noises and sounds that were too loud, and tags on his sweaters that were annoying, and on the little line on his socks that were bothersome. So we did things that we could to try to make it easier for him, but he struggled even at a very young age. And we used to say, we had a saying in the family when Bradley was young, we used to say it's hard to be Bradley. And it just was hard. He didn't necessarily fit in with all the other kids in a traditional way. We would go on hikes with our family. We traveled the country to all the national parks. We drove all over the place, and we would go to national parks. And my other two, Bradley's twin and my older son and my husband, would be way up ahead, like running, and Bradley would be straggling behind really slowly. And I would always be back with him. And I would say to him, don't worry, they're missing everything. Like we're not going to miss anything because we're taking it slow and we're taking it all in. He was a very loving child. He was so funny and clever. And I just always thought that he was unique. And I always thought that he was just quirky, and he was. And, at such a young age, you don't necessarily know. But I know that when he was about 4, there were lots of tantrums. I had 2 other kids to kind of compare it to, so I knew it was a little bit more difficult for him. And it was transitions were really hard for him. Picking him up from a play date could be really traumatic, and I couldn't get him to go. One time I had a friend pick him up from a play date because I was working, and she did not tell me until years later. I mean, really like 20 years later, what a difficult time it was to pick him up from that play date. He didn't want to leave, and he was crying and struggling and tantrums and all that kind of stuff. And she didn't want to share that with me. Which in retrospect, I kind of wish that she would have, because more information is always better. So when he was about 4, we went to a psychologist, and the psychologist said, it's either a phase or it's a serious problem. So that wasn't very helpful. And I I chose that it was a phase, and went on about taking care of him. And we continued to find things that were of interest to him. He was an incredibly talented singer and musician. He played the piano at a very young age, was a beautiful piano player, but his singing voice was absolutely incredible. And his ability to act was so natural, and he was really so talented. So we got him involved in musical theater. And I've since learned that there's a lot of drama therapy going on, actually, and that it's a way to sort of help people that are struggling with mental health issues to get involved in drama. So it can be therapeutic, and I'm not sure I really realized it then, but it was a great way for him to excel, and he shined. He had the most beautiful voice, and he starred in musicals. He was 8 or 9 years old, and he was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, and he was Joe in the Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls, and Joe and Damn Yankees. So he did all sorts of shows, and then but he still was not. It was hard to find friends, but he found one friend, and so I was so happy about that. And he had this one friend, and they were really close. And I thought, okay, everything's fine. He's got his friend. All you need is one friend, and everything's good. And then all of a sudden, and he was doing well in school, and he was getting involved in activities, and we kind of thought everything was okay. And then I took him to his checkup. I think it was like his 11-year-old checkup, and we realized he had lost 10 pounds. And then I kind of put it all together, and I realized that he hadn't been eating his lunches. Like, a lot of them had been coming home uneaten. And we realized at this time he had decided that he wanted to keep kosher, but we don't keep kosher in our family. We're not that observant. But I thought, okay, he was in religious school, and maybe it was just like his connection to Judaism. But I kind of started putting it all together, and I realized that it was kind of a way of restricting his diet. And we realized that he had an eating issue, and he had anorexia. And we tried everything that we could to get him to eat, and to get him to stay safe and healthy, and doctors and nutritionists, and the whole family was involved, and we couldn't do it on our own. And I ended up taking him to a psychiatrist who said he needs to be hospitalized, that a disease like anorexia impacts the physical nature of the body very significantly, and a child can die from not eating. So when I begged, please, he's 11 years old, there's got to be some way. I don't want to put him in a hospital. And they said, no, you absolutely have to put him in a hospital. So he went to an eating disorder clinic, a renowned clinic in Los Angeles. He was there for 7 weeks as an inpatient. He was so strong in his convictions to not eat that they ended up actually having to tube feed him to get him to eat. They finally did that, and he finally did start eating. It was a difficult stay. You can only visit in a sitting room. You don't get to go to the child's bedroom. You don't tuck them in at night. I mean, he was 11 years old. We visited every day. We brought games. We brought the dog to visit him. The family would family came, but there were no cell phones at the time. There was a payphone, and we would call him on the payphone. And his friend, this one friend that I talked about, actually came and visited him, but we were very secretive about the fact that he was struggling and didn't tell anyone. And no one really reached out. And in retrospect, I look back and and one of the things I've learned, and one of the things that I really espouse in my advocacy journey, is like how important it is to be supportive of someone that's going through a mental health crisis, or a child, or their child that's going through, no different than if it were a physical crisis. And a physical health crisis, what I say is that, everyone brings cakes and casseroles when someone is suffering with a physical ailment, and no one brings anything, and no one calls when it's a mental health crisis. So I want to break that stigma and break that barrier. And I want to say that people need to reach out. I wish that people had checked in on me and said, how's it going? Is there anything I can help you with? You want to talk, or do you not want to talk? And it's okay. Like, you don't have to talk, but I want to be here. I want to be here for you. And I tell people as well to not hide, to reach out, because you learn, so many people are going through similar things that you're going through. And you also learn about resources, and you learn about programs, and you learn about support groups and community. So it's really, really, really important. He stayed in that program for 7 weeks. I don't think it was an appropriate program for him at that age. All of the other members of the program were mostly girls. He was like the only male. They were mostly girls. Not that there aren't males that suffer from anorexia, because there are, and he was among them, but there were mostly girls, and they were older girls. They were like teenagers. He was an 11-year-old boy. So it was very hard to treat him. It was very hard for him to relate to the program itself. And it was very hard for us as parents to be part of the support group system, because it was all parents of teenagers. So we couldn't really relate. They didn't really treat him. It's almost like they didn't know how to handle a boy of that age who was quite rambunctious, as boys that age tend to be. There was some abusive behavior, putting him in rooms by himself, like a kind of solitary confinement kind of thing, giving him a lot of Benadryl to try to knock him out, to calm him down. Things that we kind of learned about, because one time I came to the waiting room and I heard him screaming, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And I realized he was in a room, locked in a room by himself. What I learned at the time, and we kind of let it go on. And part of it was because this imbalance of power, like, you're just a layperson and these are the professionals, and you're so desperate, and you think like, well, this must be what they have to do, because I'm at this renowned institution and this is what they're doing. Eventually I got my courage and complained, and it's interesting because I ended up never getting a bill for the services. So I feel like they kind of realized that it was not, we were not treated appropriately, and everybody just kind of washed their hands and went away. After he was inpatient for 7 weeks, he then transferred to an outpatient program, and I brought him in every day. And that was not very successful for him as well. He was very rambunctious. He was like running away from the program every day, and they couldn't keep tabs on him. And they finally said to me, we're going to let him, he needs to leave the program. And I felt like they were giving up on him. And a lot of times I felt like people gave up on him and the system failed him. I felt like that was a system failure. There should have been a way to create a program that could work for him, to help him. We learned about condensing, that you have to eat as many calories as you can in one meal, to try to gain weight. Every morning I would come in with a Cinnabon, which is like so many calories, and I would bring him his Cinnabon, and I would say, eat your breakfast. And I would actually say it in a funny way. I would say, eat your effing breakfast, because he was 11 years old and he thought that was really funny, but I would actually say the word. And so it was funny for like mom to be swearing. And, but he would eat, he would eat his effing breakfast because it was a Cinnabon. And, so we kind of had things under control. One thing I remember, which I forgot to mention, was when he was about 9, when he was in school, this was before the eating issues. The school mentioned to me that they felt like there were some issues and they thought maybe he had a nonverbal learning disorder, that he wasn't reading cues, social cues from students and others. Things like everybody would be teasing and joking around when the teacher's back was turned, and then when the teacher would turn back around, all the kids would stop, but Bradley didn't know to stop, and he would still be going. So we took him to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, he doesn't have a nonverbal learning disorder. He did all the testing, the neuropsych testing, that he just has very severe anxiety, and he's like a Porsche in the garage that can't leave the garage. He's got such capability, but he can't leave the garage. And he actually said to me, I need to see him 3 days a week in therapy because I need to change his personality. And that was really a really upsetting and stressful thing to hear as a child, because we loved him as he was, and we didn't think we needed to change his personality. And I opted not to do that. I opted to get him involved in musical theater and other things. I felt like that would be sort of more therapeutic for him. But it's interesting looking back now. I actually wonder if that was something that might have been not necessarily to change his personality, but maybe to change his perceptions, because I think a lot of the way he looked at the world was problematic and made life difficult for him. He ended up he came home from the hospital. He ended up having a lot of problems at school with behavior. He couldn't follow the rules. He couldn't fit in. He was getting in trouble all the time. Every time the phone rang, I was like, oh my God, what did he do now? I mean, it was just really difficult. He jumped off the roof at school because he was egged on by boys that were bullying him. He didn't really see it as bullying at the time. He just was so desperate to be liked and to be accepted. He brought mercury to school. He brought mercury to his psychiatrist's office. People behind our back were like begging the school to have him kicked out of school. Again, I wish that people sort of had come to me and talked to me about it, as opposed to doing it behind my back. We ended up realizing, I took him to several different psychiatrists, got several opinions, and they said he needs to go to a therapeutic boarding school. And again, I felt like the system failed him, like that there wasn't a school in Los Angeles that could help him. And so we ended up, I didn't want to send my baby away. I couldn't imagine not tucking him in at night. But we took him to Colorado to this school to see it. The procedure that the school uses is that they want the child to buy in, and they want the child to want to go there. It's not one of these intervention programs where they kidnap you at night and take you there. Then they took Bradley for donuts without us. And Bradley said, I want to come here because I know my life is out of control, and I want to get things back on track. And so he did, and it was hard for us, and it was hard for him. He was away from home for 20 months, but it was in the wilderness of Colorado. It was a milieu therapy they used, which is like sort of the group. They did a lot of outdoor activities. He had small classes with just a few kids in it, where the education was really directed and focused towards his abilities and his weaknesses, his strengths. And he thrived there. And, he thrived in a place where he was not stigmatized, where his illness was not stigmatized, where people were like him, and he formed bonds and excelled. And 20 months later, he came home and he was like a new kid. He studied for his bar mitzvah when he was there. We went to Israel. We took a trip to Israel with the family, and he went back to to school. First, he went to a school for twice exceptional learners, which it's like they call it 2E. It's 2E school, so it's kids with learning different learning differences, and also were excelled. And he went there for a year and excelled and was in the plays and did really well. And then he realized he wanted to try a mainstream school, and he went to a mainstream high school where he really excelled. He was still seeing a psychiatrist. He was still taking medication. He was given his first medication when he was 11, his first psychotropic medication when he was 11 at the eating disorder clinic. He continued on that medication. He had a psychiatrist who actually acted as a therapist and a psychiatrist, which was incredible. You don't see that so much nowadays. He went once a week. That doctor monitored his medications and provided therapy. He had an incredible, incredible experience in high school, starred in all the musicals, made friends, went to the prom, still had anxiety, still was kind of suffering silently, but, really was able to function. Those were like the greatest years of his life. I joined the board of that school. I was so grateful to that school. It felt like we really found a place that understood him. And then after the summer after his junior year, he started experiencing just inexplicable and excruciating pain and fatigue, couldn't get out of bed. We went to every doctor you can imagine, endocrinologists, infectious disease doctors, allergy doctors, rheumatologists, and we did Eastern medicine, and we did alternative medicine, and we went to neurologists, and he had every test imaginable, and they couldn't find anything. And they said it was just anxiety and depression. And he really struggled his senior year. The school was incredibly cooperative and helped him, and we helped him, and we got him through. He graduated, and he actually got into a renowned university, and he was really proud of himself. He wrote a beautiful essay. I remember the question was, where do you feel the most comfortable? And he wrote, he feels most comfortable in the green room, which is the room that the actor waits in, before going on stage. And it was, when I think about it, it was beautiful. And we thought, we were concerned because he was not in a good place. But we thought that maybe this is what he needed, like a new place. High school can be so difficult because like everybody is trying to fit in, and everybody's trying to be the same, and everybody's and social media, and so high school's difficult. I remember when I was in high school, high school was hard, and there's groups and there's cliques, and I thought, college, there's all sorts of different people, and there's like so many different things you can study and so many groups you can join. So I thought like this could open up a world for him that might help him discover himself. And unfortunately it didn't, and the pressure was too hard.
Before we get, I'm sorry to interject. Before we go to the phase in the college, I just want to be very clear for the sake of our audience. Yes, he had challenges, and he was seeing a psychiatrist and receiving therapy. He's a very smart kid, very smart and very creative. Because I just want to be very clear, because I think folks often think that, children who have these kind of issues are lacking in some regard. They're typically very smart.
Yeah,
right?
no, you make such a good point.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He was, like I said, I think in the beginning, like so creative, so deep, so artistic, so passionate. Like he was a very unique and special person. And you make such a good point that this illness does not define the person that has been diagnosed. It's just a part of him. It's just, or her. It's just a part of one aspect. And it's like, if you have diabetes, what big deal? You have diabetes, but you're still
Right.
this vibrant person that, is a doctor or a lawyer or a student or a fireman or a firefighter. So thank you so much for reminding our audience. And as difficult as Bradley's struggles were, his life was really good. And there were lots of moments of joy. And we were a really happy family. We were a really close family that shared so much together and traveled together and studied together and laughed together and explored together and explored the United States and explored foreign countries and read books together and watched silly movies together. He loved comedy. He was very funny himself. He could quote all the lines to all the funny movies. He could imitate, and impersonate all the funny movies and all the comedians. And he was an incredibly unique and talented person. And it is quite a loss, in spite of all of his challenges. It's quite a loss for this world to not have him in this world. Like, one thing that's sort of telling is, like, everything's crazy with the cryptocurrency, and my Bradley bought a Bitcoin way back when, like when nobody knew what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was. And I remember him saying, Mom, I bought this Bitcoin. And we're like, what is this? And he's like, oh, and the blockchain. And he's like telling me all this. And, it was for $200. He bought, which was, a lot of money for him, but it's worth so much money now, his $200 investment. So that's the kind of brain he had, and that's the kind of thinker he was. And I'm so glad that you brought the attention back to him as a person, and him as a beautiful person. He was an avid reader. He loved science fiction. He loved like dystopian novels. He loved cartoons. He loved comic books. One thing is, he was not very good with directions. He was so bad with directions, which I am too. So he got that from me. And he loved this one comic store in Sherman Oaks. And that was always what he wanted to do. Like, let's go to the comic book store. And like, no matter where we were, we could be like in Fresno, and he'd be like, are we near the comic book store? Like, can we go to the comic book store? I was like, honey, we're not
Yeah.
anywhere near the comic book store, So that was his lack of sense of direction. But it was almost like he was too involved in big thoughts to be burdened with the mundane things, like how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, and again, I apologize to you. Sometimes when I when I've met individuals like Bradley, the way you describe him is, I often wonder, like, you know, we stigmatize individuals like him. Like, hey, is this person is not the right fit in our society? And I'm wondering, like, is the society the right fit for him? He's
Right.
so, so creative, so brilliant, right? And I've met individuals like that. It's like, you know, it's hard to understand them because just they're so creative, so unique in the thought process, and they're very special.
Yes. Yes. And a lot of people, I've gone to lots of different people after I lost him, meditation specialists and mindfulness people and healers and all sorts of different people. And one of them said to me that it was his time, and that he served his purpose on this earth. That we all have like different time frames of like what our time on earth is. And so what I like to think is that he now has found his purpose through me and with me. And so he's now my partner, and we do this work together. And he had trouble finding his purpose on earth. And he maybe had a bigger purpose. He had a bigger purpose than just a regular life. And now he has this bigger purpose, and he does this important work, healing the world together with his mom.
Yeah, and Andre, we are here with you as well. I know, like, I just met you. Each one of us will contribute to his journey, and I'm going to say, although he's not physically here with us, you have a great team with him.
I do. I do.
Right?
I have the best team. Yeah.
Right.
He's right here.
Yeah. Yeah, so just I know we have limited time with you, and I'm going to make the most of it. Would you mind sharing, the final phase of his journey with us?
Yeah. So he from that point on, from college on, he had a very, very difficult time. And he tried lots of treatment centers and in California, in Texas, in Boston, couldn't seem to find the right mix of medications and therapy and modalities. And he eventually ended up living in a sober living home because we thought that would be a place where he could live with even though he was not a drug addict in the traditional sense, but he was taking lots and lots of medications because they were trying different combinations, which is something that I think we need to be very concerned about as well. This polypharmacy issue. He was living in a sober living home. He complained of not feeling well one day. They gave him some Advil. He went up to his bedroom. No one checked on him. Went to sleep and did not wake up. And the cause of death was psychiatric drug interactions. And from then on, it became my journey that his life not be in vain and that his life have meaning, elevate his legacy. And he and I as a team are working to heal the world one person at a time.
It's amazing. Well, I just wanted to thank you for sharing this wonderful journey of Bradley with you, right? And if you don't mind, I'd love to have you back to talk about, your journey. I heard a lot of things that really touched my heart that I want to selfishly talk to you about a bit more in a separate interview. So I hope we get the opportunity to do that
I would
and
love
get to
that.
learn a little bit more about your work.
I would
All
love
right.
that. Thank you for
Great.
having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we look forward to having you again.
Okay. Bye.